area of the control panel, and they will be addressed at the appropriate time during our call today. Now, as you read in your Epay update that you received yesterday, a few of our topics for today's webinar will be as follows. We're going to start with our Blueforce audit trails. I'm going to show you a little bit about that, kind of go through and show you how to see them and how to understand their value, kind of what the purpose of the audit trails are. After that, we're going to go through two facets of the Granular security changes that we did last week. So first thing we're going to talk about is how to add FONEN numbers to your caller, or basically the caller ID numbers to your job records. And we're also going to talk about adding working jobs to the employee record. So those two of the various items that we added to give you access back. I'm going to focus on these two since they're probably the biggest and I would think probably the most important of the two that were added for Granular security. And then we're going to wrap up with a discussion on running some basic Blueforce reports. Those are some of the requests that were asked last week. It's just, show us how to run some reports. So we're going to go through some of the basics of the reports out there, and if needed, we can also look at some other reports that are available out there for you. But these are two basic ones: the time card report and the time card audit report. Alrighty, so let's go to the first item. And the first item we'll talk about today is the Blueforce audit trails. So the question always comes up: what is an audit trail? What is the purpose of an audit? So an audit audit trail can basically be summarized as a sequence of time card entries that validates or invalidates the employee's final timesheet. So basically, it's basically entries in the system that show in chronological order. So basically, shows when time punches occurred, shows you where the time punches originated, and also notes any subsequent manual changes, meaning someone's gone in there and messed around with the employee's punches. So from a value standpoint, obviously, for everyone on this phone call, it's going to give everyone the ability to prevent and catch fraud, obviously, with employees in the field. But on the flip side, it's also going to ensure that the employee gets paid correctly for all hours worked. So we're going to go through here and take a look at a couple variations of and kind of show you how to get into to see these audit trails. So as I've mentioned on prior webinars, and I've mentioned quite heavily last week, is every time you do something in the system, every time you go in there and touch an employee record, and touch is in quotes, as in you go in there and change a work order, or add a job, change a job, or you change a punch, an in punch to 30 minutes less, whatever it may be. Anytime you touch a record like that and you make it change to the record itself, that it becomes part of this audit trail. So by going into Blueforce, you have full range. This is for all editors, submitters, approvers. You have full range to go in the system and actually see the full audit trail. You can see when someone punched in, when someone punched out. You can go from there and see when someone went in there and edited one of those time entries that the employee actually made. But more importantly, you can also see who did it and when they did it. The whole picture of what exactly has happened with this employee record. How do we get from the original punches to the punches that are about to get paid for this employee? So kind of looking at my example here on the slide, I have put together just a screenshot of the time card screen, and I'm going to go through and actually log into Blueforce momentarily and walk you through how to get to this point. But when you look at the time card screen, one of the things that just comes out to quick to your eye is the different colors that are available. The different colors tell you where the punches originated, but also tell you if those punches were changed or manually inputted or something occurred. So the yellows on this particular example will show you that the yellow boxes, I guess you can say, the boxes that are the highlighted times, those were all manually inputted. So for this particular job, the job shown here on the screen, all these times were manually inputted. So from an audit perspective, the question that's going to come up is, why were they manually inputted? Okay. When you go in there and input a time card entry, as we talked about on last week's webinar, you do get prompted for a reason code. And that reason code gets tagged to this particular audit trail as well. So we want to know why why are you manually inputting time? Why isn't the employee punching in and punching out? Was the employee having an issue with the time clock that day? Was the employee did they just forget to punch in? Was it their fault that they didn't clock in or out? So that's where the reason codes come into play. We want to know the reason for that manual entry. And believe me, you will be asked if a job that you happen to work on is audited. They're going to want to know, why are we making all these manual entries? On the flip side here, you may have some orange entries. Those orange entries allow you to quickly tell what changes have occurred to existing time. So whether you inputted the time manually, or whether the employee themselves punched in or punched out, those first initial time records are in the system. They're locked. They're in the system as a record for that employee. The minute you've gone in there and made any changes to that record, whether it be changing the job, adding a work order, changing the time, whatever it may be, you have now made a change to that record, and that time will now show in orange. So from a visual standpoint, you are just glancing out there and can quickly point out which time has been manually entered, which one has been changed. So I should say, has had their original punches changed in the system. So that's what the color scheme goes here. We're going to go through this a little bit as soon as I log into Blueforce. Now, once you get in and actually note and log into Blueforce and actually go to the time card screen, each time card line will have a view details little button. There's I used to call it a link, but it's not a little button there on the far left-hand side of that time card line. That view details link will then provide you with a drop-down list, which you can actually have some other options like split time card, view allocation, but for this call today, we're going to look at a view audit. So from that view audit option, you can then now see the whole detail as to what exactly happened from an audit perspective. So by clicking view audit, I do see the bottom screen here, the bottom example, and now I can see that there was an orange change made to that particular timeout. So the first line at the bottom of the screen here, and what I'll do here so everyone is on the same page, I'm going to circle this. This first time entry, you'll notice that time entry punched in was at on January 22nd at 11:32. The punch out actually occurred the next morning at 5:39 a.m. Now, at 5:39 a.m., there's a modified date. Is this telling you that's the time when the last punch was basically made for that initial punch in, punch out? And you'll notice you have a comment of new time card added. That comment is letting you know that a time card was created by the employee. So that automatically gets tagged there to the record. Now, one thing furthermore with this, you see the greens on the in and out time. The greens here are basically letting you know that the employee punched in successfully using the FONEN system, which is our phone time punch-in system. So they called the toll-free number, they punched in successfully, they called the toll-free number, they punched out successfully. That's what that green is telling you. Now, I'm going to clear my screen here. And what you're going to notice now is the top line looks a little different. Now on this top line, you notice that you have a time in, still the same, 23:32 and 23:32. They're identical. However, the timeout now, 5:39, you'll notice was edited for some reason to 5:32. Now that's a 7-minute reduction in time for this particular employee. Now, in cases like that, we should not go in there and make any changes to an employee's punch out time. Now, the employee punched out at 5:39. That is their system of record. So we won't go through all that procedure stuff that we've talked about in the last 2 weeks ago on this webinar. But regardless, we're not going to be making changes to punches. So the question will come out real quick from an audit perspective as to why did that time get changed? You reduced it by 7 minutes, but the employee on their own accord clocked out. The way this should have probably been handled is via just a counsel to the employee and said, hey, you left 7 minutes ago. Why didn't you clock out 7 minutes earlier? Maybe that's what the issue is here. We really don't know. However, what's going to happen is when you make a change like that, the last modified field here that I'm circling, that becomes filled in with the username and ID of the person that actually made that change. Now, for this particular webinar, I went ahead and blacked out or whited out that field so that you couldn't see who did that change. But regardless, that particular job on the far left-hand side, whoever the supervisor manager was on that site that made that change, their name would be appeared right there in the last modified by. And it also tells you the date it was modified, and it also tells you the reason, or actually what occurred when that change was made. So you have that information in the system. It's tagging that stuff as part of the audit trail anytime you go in and make a change to the employee record. So before I go any further, I'm going to go into Blueforce here. I'm going to log in. And as I log in here, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to get to that particular part of Blueforce. So I'm logging in as my Epay Tips and Changes webinar user. And under here, to get to that particular audit trail section, obviously you can go into time cards. Time cards right here, little clock icon in the middle of the screen. And once I go into time cards, I then have the ability now to select the job I want to work with, or as I always say on this call, I would recommend that you always say select all jobs unless you want to work with one specific job. For this particular example, I want to say all jobs just because I want to get some good examples for everyone on this call, and just say next. Now once it goes through and selects all your jobs are listed there on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. But more importantly, in the middle of your screen, you have all your time card punches for your employees. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back just a tad. I'm going to go back a little, maybe a week in time here. I'm going to do the 16th to the 22nd for my examples, and I'm going to hit search. And as I go through here, you'll hopefully see some punches that are all cleaned up since payroll day or the times that have been submitted. But as you go through here, you do notice that on the left-hand side of my window, whether it be the current pay period or a prior pay period, you always have these View Details links available for you. These View Details links will allow you to see the detail on each particular line that's on this screen. Now, as I mentioned, and when I initially started the call here, started this discussion on time cards, the yellows and the oranges are visible right there in the middle of the screen. The yellows are telling you that they are manually inputted times. The oranges are telling you that those are changes made. That's a time change or something that's been changed to that time for that particular employee's time card line. Now, at the very top of the screen, top left-hand side of the screen, you have a link. It's just sitting here. It's called Time Card Legend. Now, what Time Card Legend will do for you is when you go up here and click on it, it's going to provide you a little listing of all the time cards color schemes that are available. Now, as you see, it kind of bleeds through the view details. This is something that Epay support is working right now to correct. But typically, once it's fixed here, you actually will see the color and the description there listed right to the right of it. And it kind of shows you all the different facets or the different types of punches that could be collected on the different time card collection devices. So let's look at that. Like I mentioned, if you look at the time card legend, you'll see the greens are from the FONEN system. So when you see the greens that are listed like on the top here of top line, these were all done in FONEN. These further down that are in white background, those are telling you that those came from the Walter device. And as we go through here, you'll see some other ones in different color schemes, like a light blue and light gray, depending on their web punch or mobile punch. But for this discussion, as far as from an audit perspective goes, the ones that should be high on your list from when you're looking, when you're kind of glancing at this screen, are the yellows and the oranges. These are the oranges that are showing up as well. So those two are the ones that are big because, like I mentioned, you've manually added time or you've gone in there and changed time. And I can say maybe you specifically, when you look at this view, it's basically anyone who has access to these jobs. Somebody could have gone in there and done that. So let's take a look at this one right here I'm going to pick on. It's highlighted right now in blue. For Mr. Gonzalez here, he worked this job 5023441. He's a cleaning supervisor, which supervisors hopefully will lead by example and actually use the system. But you'll see that you have a punch in and punch out that were manually entered. And in this case, you're going to find out here for this particular example, the reason I picked it is it's not necessarily always a manually entered time, meaning someone actually went in there and just keyed in the time. Sometimes the yellows will appear on here if you use the auto split function. Now, using auto split is a good functionality to use. I won't be going through the detail of setting up an auto split or even maybe more so doing a split time card on this particular screen. But the splits allow you to go and take a group of time and then break it out amongst other jobs. So if one employee is just clocking in at one job, clocking in and clocking out, you can use the split time card function to actually take that total time and split it amongst other jobs without you having to go in and add manual lines of time. By doing the split, that is perfectly acceptable way of creating time card lines. Although they show yellow here, glancing at the screen, they are acceptable ways of doing this. Now let me go through here and show you this. If I go in here to view details real fast, and then I come in here, you'll notice that the view details screen has a couple different things going on. Okay, so you can see when you go into view details, the first thing that comes to mind is to see, and let me go in here and circle these for you. You just see the actual times. Underneath that, you see rounded times. So in both cases, you can see that the punch will have occurred at 22:03. The rounded time is to 2200. So that you know that the rounding is working. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is when you look at a time card screen, the time card is really just the raw punches. Basically, the time in and time out as recorded by the employee or manually entered by a supervisor, manager, or so forth. The timesheet view is where you actually see the rounded rules apply. So you don't necessarily see it always on the screen here, but if you go into the view details, you can actually see the rounded time there. And one of the things, before I go too much further, is one of the things we notice around the country is that in cases like that, where maybe someone punches in at 22:03, they're a little late. We've seen many cases where the supervisor will go in there and manually edit their time to show 10 o'clock instead of 10:03. Now, let me just tell you, we use a rounding rule that rounds everybody's time from coast to coast. Everyone's being rounded. So basically what happens there is we have basically that 7-minute rule. So someone can clock in 7 minutes before and after the hour, top of the hour or quarter hour, and actually the time will automatically round accordingly. So in this case, if the employee punched in at 22:03 and the supervisor had gone in there and manually changed their time to 2200, that's a waste of time and a waste of I guess for an audit person could go find out and ask, why did you round your time back to 3 minutes? Because the system will automatically round the time back, in this case, to the 10 o'clock hour for you. Same thing on the other side. If an employee had punched in at 9:55 and you wanted the system to show 10 o'clock, the system would have rounded up to 10 o'clock anyhow. So I just want to bring that up as a side note, that the rounding rule still always works. So don't go in there and waste your time on minutes like that just to correct the time card line. Now, with this screen, furthermore, as you can also see at the bottom of the screen, who was the last one that updated the record. So that updated record option allows you to see who the last person was there that went in there and did any work. And then you also see the notes section down at the bottom, letting you know that this was created by split action. So let's just let you know that this supervisor went in there, split out the employee's time. So it came out yellow, but it was done via split. Now, in my screenshot I showed you a little while ago, showed you an option where I could click on the little arrow and get prompted with some options. In this case, I have view allocation, view audit, and split time card. Now, these split time cards, well, I was mentioned a while ago that you can take a group of hours and basically an in and out for an employee and split that in and out to another job or a variety of different jobs, and the system will automatically take care of that for you based on the time you put in there. View allocation We'll go through them. I won't go through on this call, but you can see where that time has been allocated to. The view audit is the one that we want to focus on. And view audit here will show you the audit trail for that employee. In this case, it's telling you in this case that the employee's punch was created for 2203 to 12, well, basically 1003 to 1233 via split action. So the split actually was what did this this work for us. Let me show you some other ones that are on here. So let me go back up here and say this one. It works for the Children's Museum here. If I look at the view audit on that one, you will notice that we've got a time card that was added. Okay, so on this particular one, I've got time card was added, and that means this is the first original punches for the employee. And then, like I mentioned up here at the very top of the screen, you see the timeout that was edited by a specific supervisor on a certain date and time. So for those on the phone call, more from the submitter or the approver roles, whenever you go in there and you're actually going through and looking at time, and you're curious as to why changes are occurring, or you notice something is a little off with that employee's time, you can go in, like I mentioned, go to View Details, just simply click on, we can click on View Details to see kind of a big picture of what's going on. But if you want the actual detail, click on the arrow, click on View Audit, and that'll give you the actual audit trail for that employee. So this one was a good example. The employee punched out at 5:39. In essence, this example is a little bit worse than the one I mentioned earlier, because if the employee punched out at 5:39, the system would have rounded it up to 5:45. So what's going to happen here is that if I go back and change this time to 5:32, the system's still going to take that rounding rule, but the rounding rule says run it to the nearest quarter hour. So in this case, the employee's rounded time would show up as 5:30. Now what happens there is you've actually cheated the employee out of 15 minutes. So whether, I'm going to leave that up to you guys to kind of decipher that. But this is a big 15 minutes is a big amount of time. So from an audit perspective, be ready to, whether it be Lynn Rule from our audit department or someone from our Denmark team that comes over to audit, or whether it be the Department of Labor, this becomes a big question to answer now as to why did we change or basically short an employee out of 15 minutes. So let me go ahead and clear my screen here. And let's go back to our slides. And let's talk about one of the granular security changes that was done. And let's go through a little more detail. I know like 2 weeks ago I went through kind of a big picture overview of some of the things that were happening for granular security. I want to take some time now and actually take FONEN first, show you how to set up phone numbers for those locations on the phone call here that use the call-in system, and how to set those up on your own now in the system. And then after that, we're going to talk about working jobs, and those are for setting up jobs for specifically employees to be able to punch in and punch out of. So the first thing here is FONEN. Now FONEN is our time collection system in which an employee dials a toll-free number. They are then in turn prompted with just a prompt that says enter your employee ID, after which they enter the employee ID. The system is validating the phone number they're calling in from. Now, if there is a match from the phone number they're calling in from to a phone number that is set up in the system, which we're about to go and do, at that point the system says, you know what, I know they're calling from job 12345. There is no need to prompt them for a job number because I know where they're calling in from. I'm going to go ahead and ask them some other questions, and it proceeds from there. Do you want to punch in? Do you wish to punch out? And so forth. Now, if that number was not set up in the system, the employee would then be in turn asked to enter a job number. So one of the benefits of using what I'm about to show you here for the phone-in setup is to set up this phone number so that the employee never has to enter their job number. And secondly, you know that the employee is on site and not calling from their cell phone, not calling from a job 2 miles away, calling from home. You know they are on site. You know that they are calling in from a authorized and registered phone number. So that alone has some great benefits to this phone-in setup process. Now, for everyone, and for some of those that jumped on a little earlier before too, I sent out a chat message to everyone that says to basically take a look at the handout section of your control panel. There you will find that there's two documents that I saved out there for you. One's called Granular Security, Adding Registered Caller IDs. The other one is Granular Security, Adding Working Jobs. These are the two documents I'm going to be talking about as we go through these processes. Now, you don't need to have them in front of you or anything, but I make them available there on the control panel so you can download them for your reference. So that way you don't have to wait or go out to the Gateway site to look for them. You have them right here at part of your our presentation today. So let's go over to our screenshot here that I have for you of the phone-in number. So every job record has a tab called phone-in and time clock setup. In that tab, there is a open white space there that in which you would go in there and key in your registered caller ID number. So basically, numbers that you have verified are the numbers that the employee will be calling in from, and you'll just put them in there straight with no punctuation. It'll just be the area code and the phone number. So you're looking at 10 digits. And if you have multiple numbers, what you're going to do is you're going to separate them by commas. No spaces, nothing, just basically number, the 10 digits, comma, 10 digits, comma, and so forth. Now, part of this process also you will find is that the phone-in system allows you to do some other cool little things. One of the things is, well, before I go any further, let me share my next slide. Let me just mention once again what I just said is, you enter the registered caller ID number separated by phone number entries with commas, and then no space between two numbers. So one of the things, like I mentioned, one of the cool things about doing this is that our next step here is we're going to actually now be able to find sites with overlapping caller IDs. So one of the things you're going to want to do is set up that number. You're going to click on Find Sites with Overlapping Caller IDs. And at that point, you're going to be able to find out if that number that you've just entered is in use at another job site. Now, one of the things about phone-in is we want to make this unique numbers to the job. This is the only way that we can actually link or correspond a particular job number or job name with a particular phone number. So they have to be unique. And if you find that you go into the Find Sites with Overlapping Caller IDs and find that you have used that number on another job, then either A, you're going to want to remove that number from the other job and add it to the new job. B, don't add it to the new job and just keep it on the old job. Or C, remove it altogether, because phone-in needs to be unique. We want like a one-to-one relationship on every job to phone number. Now, once you do that, you also click on this little function called Enable Caller ID Matching, which is not pictured on this screenshot, but I'll show that here in a little bit. And that basically kicks into the whole process. The minute you go in here and save your information, that number is now active and live, ready for you to go in and have your employees punching in and punching out from. So the question that typically comes up around this time is, well, how do I get the phone number to start with? Well, either A, you ask the customer, tell the customer, hey, do me a favor, what's the number for that phone number that the phone line you're giving us to call in and call out from? If they don't know, the best way to do this is simply go to that phone number that the employees you want the employees to use. They call in from that number. They call your own cell phone, call someone at the office, whatever, somewhere you can actually see a caller ID readout, and then capture that number that actually is coming in from that phone call. That'll give you that number that actually will be needed to register or set up into the system. Now, there is no limit to how many numbers you can set up here for phone-in. So have at it. If there's 20 different numbers at a job site, enter all 20 different numbers if needed. That just gives the employee more of a range to be able to clock in and clock out successfully. Now, keep in mind that if we put a number in here and they actually use a different phone number, the system will still let them punch in. The only difference is the system will prompt them for an employee ID and to enter their job number. With that as well, one thing you'll notice on the time card screen in Blueforce, the time card screen will actually let you know that there is a abnormalities, the employee is calling in from a number that's not registered. So the time card punch will be colored in black background with green lettering, letting you know that that person has called in from an unauthorized phone number. So from there, you can go to the details and kind of see where they call from, what number they use, and all that good stuff. So with that, real fast, let me show you that piece so we can all be on the same page. And so one of the things here, and let me back out of here and see if I can find anyone over the current pay period that is calling in from a bad phone number. So with that, I might not be able to find one, but let's look for one anyways. So these black ones that are shown here are Walter scenarios because they're in yellow writing. That's letting you know that the employee used a Walter and had an issue. So there we go. All right, so in the middle of my screen here, I'm going to circle here in pink. This whole line, Mr. Efren Montes, he actually punched in on the 26th, which is today, punched in at 1:02 p.m., and he called in from an unauthorized or unregistered phone number. Now, that might not be a bad thing. That's just saying that we have caller ID matching turned on this job. The system is actually going to treat this as an unapproved punch until the supervisor, which is the editor or submitter, come in here, review review the employee's time, and actually then comes in here and checks this particular box at the very far left hand side, little checkbox, and then clicks on the top and says approve selected time cards. Now that basically says, all right, he did call in, he had an issue, he called in from the wrong number, but that's a good punch. Now, like I said, it may not be a bad thing because this job may be set up for the caller ID match. However, the phone numbers that are in there, we left one off, and that happens to be the one number that's not listed in the phone-in section. Not a big deal. What we can do is take this number and go back in there and add it accordingly. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to check the line. Well, actually, I'm going to check the line. I'm just going to click on View Details. When I click on View Details, it's going to tell me that the employee punched in. And you notice how here it says he punched in on the actual time was 1:02. It's going to be rounded to 1 o'clock. But the unregistered caller ID number he called in from was that right there. So as a editor, submitter, approver, now you have some ammo with you. You can find out if that is the actual number at the job site. Is that a cell phone number? Was the employee supposed to be punching in at the time? You've got something to go off of. So you have a number here that you cannot trace back. Now, if that number is a valid number, is it the number the employee is going to be using all the time at this job site? Take that number, jot it down, and then go into the phone-in section of this job and add it accordingly. So, for example, I always like to highlight it and then say copy, right-click and copy. You can do that. That typically works. But I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to that job 502-6381. So if I wanted to, I go back to my job record, go up here and say 502-6831. Find that job, and actually I think I put the wrong job, and we're going to go back and look at the time card. It says 6381, I believe is what it was. Yep, 6381, so I just transpose numbers. Alright, so once I find that job, I bring it up on my screen, click on that job record, and I now go into the job record and come down to the phone-in time clock setup tab. So once I click on that tab now, the system will now update and take me over to that particular screen. You notice right now it's completely blank. So one thing is occurring here. They are actually going to have this issue because they don't have a number in there, but more importantly, they have this caller ID matching selected. So that might be a valid job number that the employee is calling in from. So we want to go ahead and type it in here. As I mentioned earlier, if we have multiple numbers available, I would just separate it with a comma, put in my next digit, where it may be, comma, and the next number, and so forth. Okay, And then once I'm going to go down to the bottom and click on Save and save that entry. Now once I save it, you have the option that says updated successfully, which is perfectly fine. But then you can come back down here and make sure that those numbers are actually correct. We don't want to actually go in there and put anything in there just for the sake of putting stuff in there for that particular job. So same thing, if I ever want to go back and edit or change a job number, I go back, pick that job, go back to that FONEN and time clock setup tab, take out the numbers that I don't need, and then click save. Now, as part of this practice, you want to make sure if that's the phone number that he's calling in from, that it's not an overlapping caller ID. So I'm just going to click on it one time to find sites with overlapping caller IDs. When I click on that, the system will just take a couple seconds. If nothing returns on the screen that's saying that it's a duplicate entry, then you're fine. Hit save, and your job number is now, your phone number has now been added for phone-in for that job site. All right, so the next item on the list here is our adding working jobs to the employee record. So when adding jobs to employee record, basically what you're saying is anything selected as a working job, it's a job that the employee is able to punch in and punch out of on a given day. So if the employee does not have a job on their employee record listed as a working job, then what's going to happen is the employee, when they get to that job site and try to use the phone system, try to get registered on the clock, try on the mobile device to look for that job number, etc., they're not going to be able to do so and not be successful in punching in, because we've told the system only allow employees with that job on their profile to be able to punch in and punch out at that site. So with that, just a quick discussion on working jobs here. You will see that I can now go in to my working jobs section of my screen. One of the things I think I mentioned 2 weeks ago, one of the things you may notice on your screen here now is that you have got little colored areas. Anything that's in orange headers, so these little orange headers that are all over here, anything that's in orange or that orange kind of peach color, those are locked areas. You can't go in there to do anything other than view. The items that are in blue, all of these, you have ability now to go in there and edit and adjust accordingly. So just keep that in mind. If you ever go in an orange area, you just can't go in there and change stuff because you're locked out of that area. So the screen we're going to work on is working jobs. And what that basically means is on the right-hand side of the screen, you can go in there and add assigned numbers to employees' profiles. So right now, this employee, which is named James Douglas, on my example here, he only has one working job. So he can only punch in, he can only punch out at this particular job site called U.S. Airways Hangar. Now, if we want James to work at another site to cover another shift just for the day, we should always come in here and add that working job to the employee record, so that way you can cover that shift and punch in and punch out during that particular shift. On the flip side, if you ever have to go in there and put some time for an employee and they don't have the manual, this is manually put in some time for an employee and they don't have a job under their that particular job under their working jobs, you're going to have that same issue. You're not going to be able to go in there and add that time because, once again, we've told the system that employee would not go to that site, would not work that site. It's not one of his assigned jobs or working jobs. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at working jobs. This is a very simple process to do. I think this is probably the one that will be the most beneficial for everyone on this phone call. But you have the flexibility of moving employees between jobs based on this working jobs tab. Now, like I always mention, it doesn't hurt that you have an employee that has extra jobs in their record. If an employee typically works 1 or 2 jobs, but the employee has 10 jobs in the record, you can remove jobs as needed, but keep in mind, you've only made it accessible or easy for that employee to punch in and punch out at those job sites. It doesn't mean that they're going to actually work at those sites. It's just more of a convenience factor, not only for the employee, but also for you when it comes time for payroll. So let's go back into Blueforce real fast, and actually let me go one more slide, and just go through here and say that, to add a working job, what we're going to do is on the left-hand side of the screen, we're going to go into the little area called unassigned jobs. We're going to actually search for the job we want to add, and then we're going to go through and be able to search based on job number, job name, the job address, the export category, which is basically the district, the city, state, or zip. Now, we do know if you go in there and put in a TX for Texas, and you're looking for a job in Texas, you're going to find a boatload of jobs under that for you. So state may not be the best one, but we leave that as an option for you to search on. And the reason we do this is because you've got an ability to better your search results if you kind of do a bigger search. Also, when you go in there, we'll also say when you go in and put in a job number, key in the whole job number correctly. If you don't know the job number, just put in the first few digits of it, and it'll pull up all the jobs that kind of correspond to what you're searching for. Or same with the name, same with the city, and so forth. Once you've gone in there, you find the job, you click Assign in the middle of the screen. Assign will move it to the right-hand side, which is now under the Assigned section of the working jobs. At that point, the employee is set up and ready to go. For those that use web access or web punch, there's one extra step for those jobs. We'll have to actually enable the web access to make that job available under web punch for those employees. So let's go in this real fast. Let's go back over here. I'm going to go in and just bring up my Blueforce screen one more time. And let's go in this time to my favorite employee out here for our webinars. So his name is Edward. So let me go up here and pull him up. And what I'm doing is I went to the employee screen. Edward happens to be the first one on the list, but I can always use the search criteria at the top of the screen to help me with that search. Find that record, go into his employee record, and I'm already at the working job tab. And you'll notice here on the right-hand side, the working jobs that he can work are going to be all available here on the under assigned jobs down here at the bottom box. So these jobs are what he can currently, his employee, Edward, can clock in and out of on a daily basis. But let's say I need to add another job for him because he's going to be covering someone's shift tomorrow night. So I'm going to hit the drop down. These are my different criteria that I can actually search on. If I know a job number, I can put in the job number, which I can always go in here and just put in, 5 and a couple of zeros. That takes care of quite a few jobs that are in the system. The problem with doing that, if I put in too many digits in this case, it's going to tell me no records found that match that criteria. On the flip side, if you don't put in a full job number or just doing 500 in my case here, what's going to happen is you're going to find that you have a lot of jobs to pick from. Because a lot of our jobs start with 500, they've gone to 501 as the first 2 digits, and now they're at 502. So search for more than 3 digits if you're going to do that for the job number. Job name is wide open, so if I know from a job name perspective, I want to go in here and search for college because it's a college campus we're looking for. And I know college is part of the name. It's going to come up that that's the only option available for me. So a couple of different ways to search. You can play around on your end and see what you want to find here. But once I find the job that I'm looking for, in this case is the one I want to add, I can come over here to the right-hand side, click on the middle button called Assign. Assign will then take my job from the left-hand side and move it over to the right-hand side. It's down out here now at the bottom right. Now, the minute I click on Save at the very bottom of the screen is actually going to go ahead and close on me. It's going to take me back to the employee window, the main grid for all the employees. And at this point, I know that my record is saved. It tells me that it's been updated successfully. And now Edward can now go over to that location, call in from FONEN, go to the web punch, or even go to the mobile punch and actually see that job immediately. For those sites that have time clocks, those sites will need the clocks to be synced, so that way that job gets pulled down for Edward, and Edward now becomes available on that clock because we've told it he's working that particular job site. Also, with the clocks, if that employee has never been registered ever anywhere, then we need to register him on that clock. Otherwise, his biometric information will go down with the clock when you go and sync it manually. Now, you can manually sync it or just wait until the next time it syncs. So that's kind of how you do the working jobs. Quick, very simple. Once again, once you go into that employee record, at the very bottom of the screen, you have the option to go to Working Jobs tab, find the job on the left-hand side that you want to use, Go hit go. That's going to pull up all the jobs. Find the job you want to add for this employee. Click assign in the middle of the screen and save, and you are done. As I mentioned, if this employee is using WebPunch, which is the basically going online on a computer via the online application, I guess you can say, I can click on that particular job that I need to make access, mark as access for WebPunch. Click on it down at the bottom of the screen, and you'll see a little checkbox appear to the left of the job number. That's letting you know that that job is now available for this employee when he goes through the WebPunch application. Keep in mind, all the steps that I went through here actually are going to be part of those two handouts that I mentioned are available right now under handouts on your control panel. So do me a favor and go ahead and download those before you exit today's meeting at the conclusion of our meeting, either right now or before you actually exit. Yeah, so one of the questions I had is, do submitters currently have access to make these changes I'm talking about? Yes. So what that basically means is everybody right now, everyone that's on, for the most part, that's on this call, who are editors, submitters, and or approvers, so have those three roles, one of those three roles, you do now have access to doing what I'm showing here, both under the phone-in section and the working jobs section. So one of the questions I got here also mentions that there's other ways of adding working jobs. So we used to tell everyone, and some of you still use and are doing it, that's perfectly fine the way you're doing it now. Many of you go through the time card screen to add an employee. Some go through the timesheet screen to add an employee to a job. Those both work as well. Or the third way, which actually was the original way of doing it, is the working jobs way, which we had locked down until recently because of our security. We couldn't break it down to a granular level as we have now. So that's why I'm showing you the working jobs this route. And I have one other question I was addressed real fast before I go any further. It actually revolves around the first part of this discussion on the audit trails, but I have someone mentioning here that they do one-time jobs, and it says many times they get black on their time. So anytime you get a black background on a time card screen, so let me go back to time cards and show you some of those scenarios before we move on to our next topic. Let me go back over here to time cards. And like this one in the middle of the screen has a black background. What that's telling you, once again, that's telling you that that employee is either A, if it's phone in, it means it's the green text there, the employee called in from a phone number that's not registered in the system. Simple as that. So what typically happens if they're calling from a phone number that's not registered, we don't have that phone number either A, listed on the phone in setup screen, or B, that phone number that you think they're calling in from is not the one that they're using, and you can verify that by clicking on View Details. Many times the customer will give us a one number, and many times it's a different number that actually pops up on the caller ID. So that's why I always stress, when you set up a phone-in site, call your cell phone number before you tell the employees to start calling it in. Call your own cell phone and find out what pops up. And I would urge you to call yourself 2 or 3 times with that phone number to ensure that the same number appears on the caller ID every time. Secondly, the other reason you may get a black background here is the Walter punches. So I'm going to change and only show Walter punches on my screen here. The Walter punches, if you ever see a black background like these right here on the screen, that's telling you that the employee, and from the time card screen, if you just put your arrow right on top of that black box, it's going to tell you what exactly occurred. This is telling me that the employee punched into the Walter using a mismatched fingerprint. That's telling you that the employee's fingerprint that they're actually registered under, for some reason, was not reading on the Walter device. So the way the system works is it basically fails 3 times. 3 times of trying to clock in, and it can't read your fingerprint. It's still going to let you punch in. But keep in mind, it's going to let you know here for a supervisor or manager standpoint that you have to do an approval for that fingerprint because something happened. At the same time, keep in mind this can happen continuously. There are some things we can do, but I recommend you first re-register that employee on the Wall Street device. But more importantly, number two, if it continues to occur, submit a help desk ticket about it, and then Tiana and I can guide you through some other suggestions of what you can do to improve the employee's success rate at the clock. To furthermore for that, whenever you see a black background, you're not changing the record. All you're doing is approving that record. There's two different things. If you went in there and actually physically touched that record and changed the time or did some change to it, then you're changing the record. Otherwise, there's not going to be an issue by just simply clicking approve. We are going to ask and suggest that you go in there and find out why is the employee having an issue, and let's correct it. So that way we don't have to keep going every day as a daily routine to click approve on that particular employee's time card. That's kind of the reasons why for those black backgrounds. Alrighty, so let's go back. We're running out of time here, so let me go back into my next topic, and just want to go through on running some basic reports. I'm going to show you two reports, and then all I'll do is I'll incorporate some other reports into our discussions in our future webinars, just kind of so you can kind of see some of the variations that are available. Now, I chose running these two topics after getting a request for reports from last week, but more importantly, there was also a request for a review of the timesheet report, timesheet budget report that was out there in Blueforce. Now, however, the budgeting reports that are in Blueforce do not operate because we do not have an interface right now between JDE and Blueforce running consistently to update those budgets. So we're doing some stuff in the back end just to get some numbers in there, but these reports do not work. The budget reports do not work. So that's why I chose not to cover those. So for the users that asked for that last week, that's why we're not going to go through them on this particular webinar. We hopefully by middle of March, beginning to middle of March, we'll hopefully have that budgeting interface working, and at that point, then we can revisit that request to show you those reports. Two reports I want to talk about on this call today are the time card report and the time card audit report. Now, the time card report is a report that can run by job, by rate type, by punch type. You've got a variety of different ways of doing it. Shows different columns. You can go in there and add columns to it, which makes it a fluid report that can provide you detail of that employee's time card. Very good report, something you can run at any point. Many of you managers that actually oversee a variety of sites where you have people editing and reviewing time on a daily basis, for you that kind of see these sites, a time card report is a quick way of going in there and seeing kind of what's going on. The time card audit report now allows you to go through and see all the audits, the changes that would occur for a given date. It's exportable to Excel. And just like I said, provides you a view with the detail of every time card entry recorded. So very similar reports. One gives you all the audit. If I wanted to, I could export it and see all the changes that were made. And I'm bringing this up because kind of talking with our audit trail, discussing at the end of today's call, you will now have a little bit more flexibility now with this report to now actually export it out and take it to a supervisor or manager and find out, what's going on. So real quick, before I demo these, I'm going to show you real quick on one slide. The time card reports, both of these reports are located under the reports icon. The time cards are the first one on the list and often the one that pops up on your screen first. And here you have the ability to go in there and pick a date range, run a report for every date range you want. So it's right here in the middle. You have the ability to tell it, what kind of report. Do you want to look at one rate type? Do you want to look at a specific type of punch? And what do I want to show? So you have all these little check boxes that are available for you to choose what do you want to show in the report. You can keep it simple, or you can actually add columns and make a little longer report to actually review. Very simple report. This will be a quick one we'll go through here momentarily. And then the next report we'll go through is this time card audit report. Same section under reports, fourth one down the menu on the left-hand side. This one, which makes it a little different, actually will show you the time card view down at the bottom of the screen. The only difference about this report is you're going to notice that you have some arrows down here. Some of these lines that have arrows are letting you know that that is a punch that was edited, changed. There's some audit trail behind it. So when I click on that arrow, I can actually expand the screen and actually see the audit trail on my screen. Or I can export it to Excel up here in the top right-hand corner and then actually have the system just export that out in an Excel format, and I can see all of my quote-unquote, I guess, exception time cards where there was some changes made. So in both cases, they're available here under, it's called Time Card Audits, both under the Reports section. So as we wrap up here, let me go back and just real quickly show you those two reports by going into Blueforce here. And like I mentioned, go to Reports at the top of the screen, or from the main screen, click on Reports as well. And I'm just going to quickly show you the time card view because they both run very similar, but the time cards one is the one that's probably going to be used, I would say, by many of you more so than the audit one. But the time card report, once it comes up on the screen here, you notice I have the ability to choose a specific job. So I can hit the drop down, see all the jobs that I'm working with right now. I can go over here and pick a specific employee if I need to, or leave it all employees for all the employees that are out there. I have a date range that I can go through and say I want to see all the punches that are out there for maybe just yesterday. So let me go back and put 125 through 125. I can go through and say I want to see all the punches. So you guys have different options. Rate types, so the different rate types that are available for me. And this comes with a good report because many of you have snow pay. If you want to see all the employees that got snow pay up in the Northeast this past weekend, you can go through there and actually select snow pay, and it'll actually show you your rate type accordingly. Or if you want to see if everyone who got holiday in a time card, or everyone that got, you know, one that's off the wall that you wanted to track, you can actually do that off of the rate type drop down. But the big part of this report is the middle of the screen here, where you can tell the system what do you want to show, what columns do you want to show on the screen. By default, what you see here at the bottom of the window, on the bottom part of this window, is the report that's going to come out for you. But it's just going to tell you basic information. It's not going to give you hours or anything like that unless you select it from the checkbox. So don't be afraid of these reports. These reports aren't going to bite or anything. They're just going to provide you more details. So if I want to show the task on there, I want to show the actual hours the employee worked. If they use a FONEN system, I want to see the caller ID information. Now I've got some information here. Click on Submit again up at the top right-hand side. I'm basically going to reprocess the report based on my new requirements, and there I go. I have a new report with all of my variety of punches. Now, if they're blank there, it's because either A, the employee didn't record a punch at that time, or B, there's just no information like the caller ID in this case. These are all clock sites, so no biggie there. So you can kind of free range that. Once you're done, you can hit you can come down here to the drop down, pick the option to export to Excel, and the system will drop that into Excel format, Excel spreadsheet, in which now you can actually go in there and do whatever you want, resort it, send it out, email it, whatever you want to do, print it. But you have a report now in your hands. The focus is strictly on the time card view. So once again, this is just called Reports Time Cards. And the other one that I'm not going to go through here for demo is the Time Card Audit Report, which will give you the audit detail behind these punches on your screen. So as we wrap up for today's call, just want to remind everybody that if you read your Epay update, there is a scheduling class tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central Time. Yours truly will lead that one as well. And FYI, check your Epay weekly updates. Make sure that you're on tap with all the news and changes that are occurring with Blueforce and Epay. And everything we do, from recording webinars, those schedules, all that good stuff, we're available via the Gateway website. And I'll say one thing to that is everything is being recorded. All these webinars are recorded. Links are being put onto YouTube. And from YouTube, we chose that route because you can go through and see that from everywhere. So some of our team members who don't actually necessarily have network access here at ISS, you can still view our training content. So no excuses. Pass that word on to everybody else that they can actually access that on YouTube. And the links for those are also available on the Gateway site if you need to get those specific links. Support, mention this all the time. Please put in a help desk ticket for any item you need from either myself or Tiandra. If it's after hours and you need to get some assistance immediately, you can contact the after hours support line, which is the Epay systems support line. They can assist you with anything as well. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining us on another webinar today. Our next class will be tomorrow for scheduling, and we'll do the same webinar again on Thursday of this week. And then next week, obviously Tuesday, Thursday, will be new sessions, new topics. With that, I will say happy Tuesday. Hope you have a good remainder of the day, and we'll talk to you again all real soon.